We've reached the end of week 15 in our journey through reading the New Testament. We're focusing our attention on Matthew's Gospel, both this week and over the next 2 or 3 weeks. At 28 chapters long, Matthew is almost twice as long as Mark's Gospel, with which we began this series. And although many people reckon that Matthew based his Gospel on what Mark had already written, there are distinct differences. Mark's Gospel largely was written for unbelievers to try and convince them that Jesus is the Christ. Matthew's Gospel, however, is very specific in its audience. It's aimed, I think, at new believers. There's a lot of detail there. He's very specific in the way he describes different things. And because many of the new believers came from a Jewish heritage, it has that kind of slant about it. So, for example, it starts in chapter 1 with quite an extensive genealogy, a family history of Jesus. He then goes on to give a description of the interaction between Joseph and the angel and how Joseph is to accept that Mary is pregnant with the Messiah. He gives a lovely description of the visit of the Magi, or the wise men, to Jesus at his birth. He also speaks about the escape to Egypt to try and avoid being killed by Herod. And then he describes Jesus' baptism at the hands of John, his cousin, before going on to talk about being tested in the wilderness by Satan. He describes the call of those first disciples, the first friends, the first followers of Jesus. And then when you get to chapters 5, 6 and 7, he goes into a lot of detail on what has come to be called Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. The level of detail and the specifics that are touched upon here shows us that the Matthew who wrote this gospel is almost certainly the Matthew, or sometimes called Levi, who was called by Jesus to get up from his Roman tax collecting table and follow him. As an accountant, that level of detail, that precision would be important to him. Matthew's Gospel, as I say, is reckoned largely to be aimed at a Jewish Christian audience, to try to help them to recognise that Jesus is a fulfilment of the law and the prophets, that he's the promised one of God who was to come to be the Messiah, to save people from their sins. Now you might think, well, if it's aimed at a Jewish Christian audience, then why would most of us who are Gentile Christians bother to read it? But it actually underlines the importance of our heritage and reminds us that Jesus was born into a Jewish family. And that heritage in the Hebrew Scriptures is hugely important for us to see the bigger picture of how God has worked with mankind since he created us. I wonder if it was tempting for you, as it was indeed for me, just to rush through these chapters in Matthew's Gospel, because there's so much that's familiar there. I really had to try and stop myself doing that, to slow myself down as I was reading it. And in particular, my eyes lighted on the Beatitudes at the beginning of chapter 5. What a wonderful passage. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And then my personal favourite, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. What a wonderful passage of scripture that is. It seems to almost sum up what Matthew is trying to get at in the whole of his gospel. I suppose it could be described in two ways. It's about what Jesus has done for us and what we are called to do for Jesus in the way we live our lives. So over the next few weeks, as we continue to read through Matthew's gospel, let's take nothing for granted. Let's not allow familiarity to breed complacency in our reading of the scriptures. The Lord bless you.